Hello, I just thought I'd give you a quick update on where Mac data binding is at with MvvmCross. And basically what we've got here is a lot of work done by Tim at Locate recently and Kevin at Central Stage over a long period as well. So you know, there's a heap of work that's gone into this. It is using portable libraries now as well, and it's really looking very nice indeed. Obviously the challenges of being on a desktop with a menu and everything else is a bit different to being on a mobile device, but it's still the same binding underneath. So what I've done at the moment is I've just ported some of the API examples program across, and and you can see what it looks like. Let me just pull it up. So this is what the front page looks like for Mac and what it looks like for iOS at the moment. Obviously there's styling and things to do. But you can see hopefully that the code for this first view in iOS, in UIKit, is basically this. It just uses a standard table view, creates a binding set, whereas in the same code for Mac, it uses an MVX table, and it just adds one column to it, and then it's very similar binding code. So hopefully you can see how similar that is to the code there. And then if we step through a little and actually go to some of these tests, then I will show. So this is date time running on both, and you can see that we've got two dates, and if you choose a date over here, then you can see how it updates in both places, and here similarly, if you choose a date, then it updates in both places. So that's binding working for date times. And the code for that again is very similar. So if we find date time here, then you can see this is the UI kit, so it's UI text field, UI date picker, and you can see the binding down here is very similar. And on the NS, on the next step, then you can see here that's the base class, the date time is here. So you're creating an NS text field and you're creating an NS date picker, and you can see that we are just doing binding using exactly the same type of syntax, and really this is quite portable code across the two. Similarly, I won't show you all of these in code form, but it's very straightforward. For time, so if we have a time picker, then over here you can choose the time to be whatever, and over here similarly you can change the time, and you'll notice that the text box above binds. We got a few other samples, so the picker isn't done yet, but this does work on iOS, so we should really pull that one across as well. A list is just this table view, and you can see if we add things, then we add things, and that's all done. Let's pick it up. In the list view, you can see again we're using an NS table view with an MVX table column within it, and you can see that the binding is very straightforward. It's for an item source to the items, which is an observable collection, and the buttons go to add command and remove command, and it'll be exactly the same thing in UIKit. So if we find the list view, you know, it's exactly the same type of layout. The item source go to items, the add goes to add, the remove goes to remove. So we continue forward through. I can show you the next ones are all Android specific, so they're not actually in either app, all the way through to observable collection. And here you can see we actually bind these individual labels. We bind these to indexed cells. So you can see the code for that again is very similar on both. We're binding here to item 0, item 1, item 2, and in the this is the Mac example, we're doing exactly the same thing, binding to item 0, items 1, and items 2. So that all works very nicely. And just continuing through other things we've got here. We've got the observable dictionary, which binds to similar to the previous one, but this time is binding to indexed by string. So you can see again it's working straightforwardly. With errors is quite cute because we have these kind of validation, if you like, items, and you can see we have the validation count there as well. And this, you know, is showing that we can also set kind of the visibility of these things. It's dodge.com. Then you can see how that brings out all the errors so that they're all removed. And let's just do this one as well. Then you can see both of those are binding in the same sort of way, giving you the same sort of answer. The next test in here is just text, and you can see we bind to text, and also that we do bind correctly to numbers as well. So we have some numeric binding in there, which allows us to see the binding, and the top one's just text. We've got seek bars, so you can see you can do the seek bars. There's a small difference here that one's a float and one's a int, but those can be corrected as well, so you see those going. We don't have subviews yet in iOS, but I think the code's there, we just haven't actually tested it through, so that should work. We've got we've got the numeric one here, so this is doing a two-way value converter, and you can see it's just taking -10 off of the top number, so that should just work. That's just a value converter. We've then got these kind of these are the Tibet style bindings, so these are much more complicated, and you can see these are driven by expressions, all of these. So I'll just show you that. So we're looking for if, seek view, the if view. So these binding expressions here are a lot more complicated. You can see that they are of the form if test val 1 is less than test val 2, show first, otherwise show second. And that is used fully down here to drive it. It's perhaps easier to show you actually what happens in the maths example. So in the maths example, what we're actually going to do is test val 1, test val 2 are the properties on the view model, and actually we're binding to expressions like this and displaying those on the screen. So let's just show you that. Move on. So this is the maths example, and you can see, so initially it's 10 plus 2 equals 12, etc. And if we drive these two things, hopefully you can see how all those binding expressions update, and hopefully you can see how they still update when you do both. So that's how the more complicated binding expressions of Tibet are driven together. Apart from that, then that I think is it for this demo. Because the last one is Radio Group, which is just an Android thing at the moment. But I hope that that gives you some idea of the status of binding on Mac currently. It's pretty good. It really is thanks to Kevin and to Tim and Kevin, who've done a heap of work on this. If you want to check it out, it's on the Mac Play branch, this particular example at the moment. It is in its own repo, its own branch at the moment, just because it's not really as fully established as all the other platforms. I'm only using it on MonoMac at the moment, just because it's the open source branch at the moment. And I'm only using it on Mac to actually test. But I believe Tim has also got this building fully on Visual Studio by using the MonoMac assembly, which is pretty darn cool. And he's also integrated some of it with NuGet as well, so you might be able to pull things in from NuGet, which would be excellent. So I just wanted to give you that update, and I hope that's useful. So Mac is certainly happening and evolving.